Later, dickheads. I mean, welcome to Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the podcast where we do a deep dive into the entire Charles Band-iverse, be it early independent stuff, Empire International Pictures, or Full Moon Entertainment. And I want to just come in and say hello to my co-host who is joining me for this episode. Monkey.
Oh, Monkey. I'm Steve Guntley. Welcome. This is the podcast. It's all about shark boobs, demon strip clubs, and sexy pogo sticking, which means, of course, we are talking about Evil Bong from 2005. Holy shit. One of the movies that we were kind of, I mean, at least I can speak for myself. One of the movies I was not really looking forward to digging into, and excuse me, it's 2006. Got that wrong. One of the ones I was not really looking forward to digging into because this is a pretty prime example of kind of late era Full Moon Entertainment, which I think everyone will kind of agree, including Charles Band, that we're starting to see a severe decline in quality around this time. And I feel like Evil Bong is kind of the exemplar of that era.
Yeah, we're on our third episode now, and I've already forgotten to introduce myself, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I am Jared Hornbeck, one of the other hosts of this show. And
Welcome.
I mean, I might just be too high. Really might be what it is.
Oh, I think that's probably
I might have
it.
entered the Bong world, and
you entered
I may
the
not be
Bongaverse.
operating with all my faculties. So forgive me,
Are you
listeners.
surrounded by bored-looking strippers with weird bras right now?
I am not, but I am surrounded by a bunch of rotating marijuana leaves, and so I am kind of in a little bit of a trance.
Gotta watch
you're
out for those.
absolutely right. This movie, this was one of those ones where it was kind of, when we were taking this on, it was like, all right, we'll get to this later era Full Moon stuff, and I was not looking forward to it at all. And I think when we first set this up, I in my mind, I was like, oh, you know what? We'll get a nice run of some Full Moon proper. No, here we are, episode 3, Evil Bong. You're welcome, everyone.
You know, I felt like it was important to just kind of jump in head first on these ones because, well, first of all, we have 8 of these movies to cover. 9 if you include the crossover with Ginger Dead Man, which is another series I'm not particularly looking forward to. But yeah, this is kind of a big prolific part of latter day Full Moon, and I felt like we should jump into it early and just kind of rip that Band-Aid. Did you think your expectations were surpassed in any way, or about met, or where did you end up coming down on it after finally watching the film?
Okay, so I do have a lot of thoughts about this. One of them is that is this movie in 480p?
It looks like absolute dog shit. It looks like it was filmed on a Game Boy camera.
This looks like, when in the year 2023 of our Lord, when you go to a bar and they still have one of those really old super standard def TVs, and especially if they're trying to show sports.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost like your eyes have to adjust because you can't see shit. That was how I felt watching this on my, 65-inch 4K LED TV at home, because the transfer, in addition to how it probably just looks like shit to begin with, was awful. I mean,
you know how sometimes Amazon takes a second to load, and there'll be big pixely looking chunks, it will look a little bit out of focus, but you just need to wait for the screen to refresh. I kept waiting for the screen to refresh the entire movie. I thought, okay, well, surely something is buffering, something's up. No, this is just the way the movie looks.
I'm so glad you said that. I made a note writing this down. In quotes, I just wrote buffering the movie.
Yeah. Oh, see, my quote, I gave it another the movie subtitle. I called this Spencer's Gifts to the movie. That's basically what it is. This movie is just kind of pitched at the level of somebody who really enjoys a Spencer's Gift.
Okay, well, you know what else this movie and Spencer's Gift have in common? One location.
One location. Well, okay, 2, because they rented out. Well, I don't even know if they rented out a strip club. I think they might have refurbished that apartment.
They did not. The Bong world is that has to be the other side of that apartment set.
I think it must be. Yeah.
This is a one and done, man. A one location. I can't get over how cheap this movie was. And I
Shot in a
knew
week,
that
yeah.
going in.
Yeah.
That tells you something. That
And that's not
essentially
uncommon for Full Moon, but
right.
this
But
was
it's like,
shot in a week.
in the time it would take us to record and edit an episode is how long it took them to make this movie.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this is, you could tell there are like flubbed lines in it. Like they didn't go back for second takes or for coverage or anything like that. They're just like, who gives a fuck? Come on, just keep moving.
You know what else I was thinking too? It's like, when you get a new TV and you have to turn off the motion smoothing?
Yeah.
What's the opposite of motion smoothing? Because whatever that is what it felt like to watch this movie.
Stillness roughening. Yeah. They added stillness roughening to the whole thing.
Stillness roughening. I like that. We should trademark that because that's boy. I mean, we haven't talked anything about what this movie really is about. But I think Charles Band summed it up best. We've sort of got into where maybe we'll give a little plot summary in some of the movies, and Charles Band said he loves movies that don't need a tagline, and Evil Bong is a movie that doesn't need a tagline, and it doesn't need a plot summary.
You pretty much know what you're getting in for. And like, I want to try and provide a little bit of history or context or something for the wider picture, but not really a lot to do with Evil Bong. But there is one element I want to talk about that this movie kind of introduces. Charles Band is a lifelong diehard Marvel Comics fan. And so when he started imagining like the Full Moon as this long-running brand, he marketed it he designed it after Marvel Comics. So in the early days, he would include little video segments at the end of all the VHS tapes of like Charles Band's score, which is kind of like Stan's soapbox. He was close friends with Stan Lee in real life, and he really liked the idea of having this big interconnected universe. So one more thing that he was kind of weirdly on the cutting edge of is a shared universe kind of idea. And so since the early days of Full Moon, these movies have crossed over a lot. Like characters from Bad Channels will appear in Puppet Master, and like Doll Man and and the Demonic Toys will square off, things like that. And I bring that up because Evil Bong does have elements of that, although I think it is done in a more tossed off cameo heavy way than it is in an actual like thought out, oh, this would be fun to join these universes kind of way. It feels very perfunctory here. But it is something to bring up because these movies are going to be crossing over and intersecting a lot. And I think that's a fun way to approach it. And I think it's also a really smart way of kind of distinguishing your brand from the just oodles and oodles of generic, like, bad horror movies that are on video store shelves.
I agree with you. And I think it should be said, like, right off the bat, I didn't outwardly hate this movie. Like, it's not something I'm going to revisit anytime soon. But I wasn't like angry at it watching it. I mean, I was more like baffled at some
I was more just
the quality of it. But when it comes to what's actually in the movie and sort of why they make some of the choices that they do, like you said, given Charles Band's love of Marvel Comics and shared universes, yeah, you can totally see that. And I sort of appreciate that about it. I wish it were done in a more, like you said, in a more meaningful way, but it's really, what can you really expect with a movie called Evil Bong? Like,
I mean, look, I am somebody, and I think you are too. I'm somebody with a great appreciation for the good bad movie. You're Troll 2, you're the Room, Birdemic, the movies like that. Like, they're a lot of fun. It's great to like have people over, kind of roast these movies, and sometimes like I develop a genuine appreciation and a fondness for movies like that. But there became like kind of an obnoxious trend starting around this time of making intentionally bad movies to try and get that market, and that's kind of what Evil Bong feels like. It's also a harder pitch for me to watch a bad comedy than a bad horror film, because a bad comedy just means the jokes are lazy and stupid. With a bad horror film, the jokes tend to come organically from the badness of the material.
100%. I mean, I think the best thing about watching bad movies that are actually just bad movies is the sincerity and the earnestness with which they're made. And I don't see a lot of that here. Like, I don't think there was any effort to make a good movie and it just went wrong somewhere along the line. I mean, this is tongue planted firmly in cheek. And yes, most of the jokes are pretty bad. Mm-hmm. I would be lying if I said I didn't laugh once or twice. There
Once or
were a
twice.
couple
Once or
of
twice, it'll
chuckles
sneak up on you.
I had from something, but I think you're absolutely right, and this does get a little bit close to, yeah, your Birdemics, anything made, by Asylum or anything for those sci-fi Sharknado and Giant Octopus, whatever
Yeah.
movies. Like, I'm much less interested in watching those, and like you said, they're a lot less fun to watch with a crowd of people because it's more fun to watch someone failing sincerely at trying to create art. I think that's where you get the most enjoyment out of
Absolutely.
bad movies.
There's like an earnestness to something like Rock and Roll Nightmare, and there's a real deep cynicism to Sharknado, or even I think Evil Bong feels kind of cynical in that way, which is not like I agree with you that like I wasn't like enraged by this movie. It was more confused than anything else, but it's not a fun sit. Like it's an 85-minute movie and it feels interminable.
How is this movie longer than Trancers?
It's
Like,
longer than Trancers by like 15 minutes almost. Yeah, and Trancers is such a swift, enjoyable watch. I think I want to ask too a little bit about your relationship with weed and with weed humor, because like I am somebody, I'll admit I do smoke weed. I started in my 30s, and a large reason that I never smoked weed throughout my like teens and 20s is because I find humor like this in this movie really obnoxious. And like I just kind of thought that that's what stoner humor was, and that's what like stoners enjoyed, and it's really not. And I think one of the big issues I have with this movie is that it feels like it's shot by stoned people, which is not it's not giggly and it's not trippy, it's not psychedelic. It just feels slow. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. My history with weed is that I don't smoke it. I only imbibe in, edibles or gummies, mints, things like that. When I was younger, in my 20s, I would smoke recreationally with people, and I won't get into specifics on here, but I had a really bad experience, and it turned me off of it for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until my late 30s that I sort of felt like enough time and space were between me and that experience, and so I was kind of like, you know what, like I think I have a better understanding of my body now, more in tune with my body, so I could probably, partake again in some capacity. And I slowly but surely got, back into it a little bit. But I'm sort of like you, like like there are I'm not a fan of stoner humor either, and there were a couple of things here that just were so sort of period specific that made me wince, not because a 2006 movie looks like the late 90s into the early 2000s, but because it just kind of falls into that same category of stoner stuff. Like they pick up a magazine that has a Sublime ad on the back of it.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then just like little things like that. It's sort of like you're just hanging out with like the stockroom guys at Pacific Sunwear. And that's not enjoyable.
None of these characters are like likable or the types of guys you would like to spend more time with. And they're drawn to be broad caricatures. They're drawn to be big, stupid idiots.
They are, but I will say this. I do think each of them is sort of given one absurd and sort of unique characteristic. Like, yeah, I do sort of love the fact that the jock character has all of his sports trophies that are there, and that he's past his prime. He's kind of like Matthew McConaughey's character in Dazed and Confused, holding on to the glory of his, high school football trophies. I think they're high school. They might have been college according to the movie. I don't really remember, but that character, just the fact that he has that characteristic, Brett is the name, the jock's name, and the whole thing about the main character being Larnell being a law school dropout and not on speaking terms with his father, and having this curmudgeonly grandfather who comes in every once in a while, is just sort of, it's odd. I dare to say
doing
quirky.
Something. Yeah, they're trying to give them some kind of characteristics, like above like just the very basic, Which I can appreciate, but like none of these guys really jumped out at me. I guess a very basic, like quick overview of the plot is that there's these four guys who share an apartment. Three of them are kind of big stoners, and one of them is a new guy. He's like a nerdy guy named Alistair who speaks like he, carries a thesaurus all the time. And he gives them $40. They give him a shitty mattress in the grossest looking little man cave you'll ever see. And one of the guys buys what promises to be a haunted bong because he wants to get magically high off of this. So it arrives in the mail. They smoke up, and then as they fall asleep after using this bong, they get transported into something called the Bongaverse, which looks like just kind of a rundown strip club that is occupied by like demonic strippers that wear bras that have either like mouths or sharks or what else was on there? Like there are three different bras. Lips. Yeah, there are a couple of different bras.
It was like lips, sharks, and like fangs, like monster fangs, I think was the third
something
one.
like that. And so I think the idea is that they get in and like motorboat you or something, and then the bras start biting you. It's kind of unclear because like not to get too far ahead, but nobody actually dies in this movie. They all get freed from the evil Bongaverse. But basically, yeah, we learn that the evil Bong is like possessed by some kind of wicked spirit, and Tommy Chong shows up in the final act of the movie as kind of a deus ex machina to save everybody from the evil Bongaverse. And that's kind of the overview. And then there's just a lot of like weird shit in between, like to call out some recurring players, like we like to mention. One of them is an actress named Robin Sidney. She's going to be important going forward for this later half of the full moon kind of experience here because she is Charles Band's longtime girlfriend. They've been dating about 15 years now. She plays the ditzy girlfriend in this movie, and she's going to be like an associate producer and like a recurring actor in a lot of full moon features going forward from here. Another recurring player here, making his last appearance, is Mac Allberg. We mentioned him last time. He's the cinematographer. Unfortunately, this would be his last film as a cinematographer, and I hate ripping on it because it looks so very, very bad, but he was a better cinematographer at one point. He died, sadly, a couple years after this.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking to me that this thing had a cinematographer, that this thing had a person who was behind the camera, like looking at how these shots were composed and looking at what the product was on screen. Like this really has just such an amateurish feel to it. It's like you would think that like this would be directed and shot by the same person because it has that vibe of like almost voyeuristic of like, we just put this static camera in this shithole apartment and watch these four guys live their lives. And that's like the vibe you get from it. And the fact that like a professional person shot it is just crazy because, I mean, content aside, we're talking the aesthetics of it. It just looks like pure dog shit.
So one of the recurring players I wanted to highlight here is Robin Sidney. She is Charles Band's girlfriend for the last like 16 years. She plays the kind of ditzy girlfriend here. Giving a really balls to the wall performance. I have to give her that. She is very committed, but we're going to see her popping up a lot, especially in these later day full moon movies, because she's going to pop up as an actress a lot and as an associate producer. And then, we mentioned this is the final film of Mac Allberg, the cinematographer. Sad note to go out on because this movie looks like shit. But this is the final time for him. And then, as we'll get to, we do have a couple of cameos from a few recurring full moon players that we're going to address.
Yeah, the Mac Allberg thing for me is crazy because this type of movie, when you watch something like this, it's almost crazy that it has a cinematographer.
Yeah.
Like that someone was in charge of setting up and composing these shots. Like there wasn't just a static camera propped up in this shitty apartment capturing what these guys are doing, that like someone was actually like telling people to hit their marks and looking for lighting and stuff like that. I mean, who knows? Maybe he wasn't doing that. Maybe he is DP and credit only, but like this really doesn't feel like it even has a cinematographer. It's just that amateurish of a production in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it should be mentioned, like he is the guy who shot like Reanimator. He shot From Beyond. Like
Yeah, no,
he is
crazy.
a capable cinematographer. I think he just was given a really shitty like Goodwill secondhand camera and forced to kind of make the best out of a bad situation.
Yeah, can't
So
wait to get back to him. I mean, all the movies you just named, like those are going to become big eps here that we'll do eventually, and like we can talk about Mac Allberg with a little more positivity and reverence when we get to some of those heavy hitters down the line.
yeah, really the kind of vibe of this movie is just like bad sitcom. Like it does really feel very sitcom-y. Like it's all in one location. Which is all just like feels very cheap, and it's also like it's got those weird little animated interstitials going from scene to scene. Like it feels like an episode of Friends or something like
It's
that.
got real like Evil Bong will return after these messages.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we should talk about our villain here because this is going to be a signature character for 8 whole movies. How do you feel about Evie so far? Evie the Evil Bong. Is she really popping for you?
My feelings on Edie are conflicted at best.
Okay, all
I
right.
think
I'm
I
less conflicted.
this seems to me on the surface like the reason I say that is because the reason I say I'm conflicted and that I'm not just leaning entirely one way, which I feel like is probably similar to the way that you're leaning too, is that I think Michelle Mays, the voice actress, is gives like a pretty hearty, confident voice performance. Like
She
I
seems to be having fun. Yeah.
right. That being said, this really comes off as a horribly racist. like
Yeah, pretty racist, pretty ugly. As a puppet, it doesn't do anything. Like its mouth doesn't move when it talks. Like its eyes wiggle back and forth a little bit, but that's about it.
well, so that's so okay. So that's the thing is like some of these full moon creature movies have pretty cool practical effects, and there's going to be some series we didn't get into yet where a bunch of entries in the series have some pretty neat stuff that they do. The fact that they couldn't get like the mouth or eyes on this prop to move is just really disheartening.
Yeah. I
like,
mean, look, Band talks in his book about this being like a really hard stretch for him. Like the DVD era, you'd think would have been good for his brand, but like he struggled to get movies made around this time. The deal with Vestron Video had collapsed, and he'd gone from owning like 30 different properties in LA to living on Robin Sidney's couch in a 1-bedroom apartment. So like he'd been falling on some pretty hard times, and these movies are getting progressively cheaper and kind of harder to look at.
yeah, I went back to Confessions of a Puppet Master to kind of read through the early 2000s part of the book, and this is just glossed over completely. I mean, he talks about Ginger Dead Man because he talks about meeting Robin Sidney and the fact that they would become a couple.
And there's a great Gary Busey story in there about that as
right,
well.
which
So,
we'll
yeah.
keep that in the docket for when we get to the first Ginger Dead Man movie. But there's really nothing about Evil Bong at all. I mean, that entire chapter is primarily devoted just to him being served legal documents for all the debt that he was in.
Yeah, basically. Even it came from the video aisle, which is kind of the full moon companion piece. Like the article on that is even like, yeah, we know these movies are lousy. Like we're talking about them because it was a long running franchise, but these are bad, and nobody really defends these. So they are what they are. But apparently they were lucrative enough that they made more of them. They made a ton of them in over the next 15 years. They said that Part 8, which is called Evil Bong 888. Is going to be the final one. So that is done.
End of an era.
End of an era.
Well,
Yeah.
you can see these being lucrative because this is for someone. Like there is someone who's going to see this DVD cover art and is going to be like, "That's a cheap movie that I want to watch or I want to own." And do you know what we call those people?
We
Bro,
call them us.
bro,
Bro. What's up, bro?
bro. This movie
I
does
mean,
this movie have the most bros out of any movie before? Like it just feels. It felt
it's
like
very bro. It feels very like pitched at like I hope they serve beer in hell kind of crowd. Like
Well, I posit a question to you then, which is, do you think that that was something that was like ad-libbed by the lead actor who played Larnell? Like, do you think they gave him free? Because he seems to be the one who does it the most. We have some other catchphrases that we'll find from other people, but this actor, John Patrick Jordan, I wonder if this was just, it was like just improv. Like, what would a stoner say? How would these guys talk to each other? And he just went overboard. Or was this a actual writing choice of Dominic Muir, who is the screenwriter? I think he wrote it under the name August White, this movie, but he is also the man who wrote Critters and Mystery Science Theater 3000 favorite City Limits.
Oh, hey, all right. I mean, like it feels like he's a capable screenwriter who maybe could have done a little better if given more than a day or two. I imagine he had to turn this around in, and it's one of those movies that people are always going to want to rent it because what the hell is this thing? It's like, wait, this movie's called Evil Bong. It can't really be about that, can it? And it's got Tommy Chong in it holding a chainsaw. Like what? So like you assume it's going to, but you're getting what it says on the tin. Basically, it's one of those movies you might be enticed into renting it, and then you watch it and you're like, why did I rent this? But like we said, at this time, like DVDs are on the way out, streaming is on his way in, and I think he found some success with the Full Moon streaming service eventually. But this was kind of coming at a weird, hard time, and it was a difficult one to market. And it's not a particularly worthy movie to watch. It's
that sounds like a pretty definitive statement, and
it's
I
not
agree
one
with
that really gives you a whole lot of reason to go back and feel sympathy towards. I guess we should talk a little bit about some of the stuff that takes place in the Bongaverse, because that's a decent chunk of the movie takes place there. This is where they smoke out, they fall asleep, and then they wake up in this haunted strip club. And this is a place where Charles Band wanted to sprinkle in a bunch of cameos from other Full Moon movies. So some of the human actors we get here, Tim Thomerson shows up as Jack Death. Like, he's wearing the wrong color trench coat, but he shows up as Jack Death.
I love that piece of information. They only had the doll man trench coat, so you get a weird Jack Death doll man hybrid.
Yeah, it's, whatever. He says the wet hairs for squids line, and then kind of moses along. You get Phil Fondacaro reprising his role from the movie Decadent Evil, which I've never seen, but he is a favorite of Charles Band's, who shows up quite a bit. And then you have some of the puppet characters like Ooga Booga. Ginger Dead Man is going to show up here, and one of the demonic toys. And many of them are masturbating, and they're really gross.
There's more masturbating puppets in this than I would care for there to be.
Yeah.
I would be lying again, though, if I said that the initial cut to the masturbating Ooga Booga did get me to laugh, only because it's so utterly ridiculous.
It's so bad. I mean, when the Ginger Dead Man started doing it, it was like, okay, we're not funny anymore because he's verbal about it.
Right. He's making puns and everything, and so that's the thing. Is I think a problem with something like this, like we said before, is that horror comedy is hard to do because you need one has to sort of work better than the other, or every once in a while you get a really nice mix, like a Cabin in the Woods or something along those lines. But here, I mean, this humor is just so broad for so much of it, and no more exemplified, I think, than early on in the movie when you get Larnell's grandpa, who just rolls in looking like, Logan Roy, and shouting profanities and calling everyone sea sucker words, and it's just he does have one line which I wrote in my notes in quotes, which legitimately made me laugh, which was, before saying something else, he prefaces it with, "I'm going to take myself a quick dump, and I'm a simple man." So got a little...
I will agree that this was the one part in the movie that got a genuine laugh out of me, because he's doing, he's this rich old man, and he's building up that he has this new girlfriend that he met at the gym. She's got this tight, hot body. All the guys are like leching after her, assuming that he scored himself some like hot young trophy wife. And then the reveal when his girlfriend actually comes into the room is that, oh, she is a woman his age. So she is like in her late 70s and looks like she just came from a nursing home.
Oh, no.
This was kind of a big laugh for me, but then they beat it to death by like they wouldn't just let it be that moment. They had to keep bringing it back. Like, I can't believe you married that old bag. It's like, no, the joke is that she is his age. Like, she is age appropriate for him. And you should have left it there. But like, yeah, then they kind of dragged it through the mud.
Well, the actress, her name is May Laborde, and she died in 2012, January of 2012, at the age of 102.
Oh my God! So she's already
when
90,
she was
96
making
here.
Exactly. Yeah, when they were making Evil Bong, she was 96 years old.
Wow, good for her. You know, like she's funny. She walks in and like that's just a funny bit. And but no, then they can't leave well enough alone, and they don't like trust that this will just be like a funny bit and we can leave it here.
Well, and also it's like with this grandfather character, it's like somebody saw Rip Torn in Dodgeball and went, "Aha, that's what we have to do." And so like that's a character in this movie.
And I do wonder if Brian Cox like watched this movie and based a lot of Logan on this character. I think there's a lot of deep threads. I think so. I think there's a strong case to be made. Yeah, so I mean, we're cutting back and forth between this and the Bongaverse, and then Tommy Chong literally just kind of barges into the movie about 20 minutes before the end. It's clear that they could only afford to get him in this movie for one day, so they had to kind of make the most of it and wrap the plot around it. I think he's actually pretty fun. Like, he's doing his Tommy Chong shtick, and he seems to kind of know what movie he's in, and he's leaning into it. But he basically shows up. He is the original owner of the Evil Bong, and he's the only one who can destroy it. And so destroying the Bong will free everybody from the Bongaverse, even though they were being eaten by boobs throughout the whole movie. They're all fine. And yeah, I do want to shout out the one little moment of Robin Sidney having some kind of weird meltdown. I don't know if the implication here is that the drugs are making her go crazy or if she's just like an insane person trying to be sexy, but she just starts flailing around the screen for a good 5 minutes.
You know, a lot of this movie,
stick.
She sure does.
Yeah.
She sure does. A lot of this movie is nondescript and forgettable and bland and cheap. That is a memorable moment. That is a memorable moment of a performance. I will remember that.
You always have to feel bad for people like when they go like just really balls to the wall and no one else in the movie is at their level, because they just end up looking kind of foolish when they should be saying like, okay, no, she's trying to put a little energy and a little spark into this movie. But because nobody's matching her or even attempting it, it's just like, and we also don't get a follow-up on this. Like, was this weed making her go crazy? Like, why? What weed would make anybody do that?
That's a great question. But also, if other people were acting the way that she acts in that scene, then we'd have a real trauma movie on our hands. We would have we'd have a Terror Firmer, we'd have a Citizen Toxie, we'd have a Return to Nukem High type thing. And we don't, because what they're trying to do in this movie, to mixed results to say the least, is they want to have the sleaze factor, and they want to have the gratuitous nudity, and they want to have the weed jokes and the weed culture. But this movie also is sort of concerned with having heart, which is odd.
Yeah, weird choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't really that doesn't really connect in any kind of way, but they are trying to set up like a relatable love interest between the nerdy main character and like the supposedly like sweet girl. But I mean, this is a very, very tame R rating. Like this, I feel like if you're going to make a sleazy movie, I think you just need to kind of lean into it and just really like go for it. And I feel like this one was just kind of pulling its punches. So it's not like sexy. It's not that funny. It's just kind of a nothing movie.
Right. And it's like, you can see where they're sort of sprinkling their influences in, because on the dresser, I think it's the dresser with the sports trophies on top, is really predominantly placed a Vivid Video sticker.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what this movie is attempting to hearken to you. It's like, oh, you've seen, but I will say, like, quality wise, like, I felt like I was watching a Vivid Video for a little bit
I
at
mean,
some parts in here. Like,
yeah, I feel like a lot of pornos would look better than this. Yeah.
well, so when I was younger in my parents' house, we had one of those black box descramblers,
Okay.
and so everything what would happen is when you click the button that was in the back, everything would go up a channel, and so my parents had the like Playboy, Spice, etc. stuff that was whatever channel it happened to be, but when you press the button in the back, it went up a channel, so it wasn't blocked anymore, but it didn't come in perfectly clear. So it
Okay.
would sort of like, it was a little fuzzy, a little warped, some tracking issues and stuff like that. And this is what I felt like watching this. I was like you said, you were waiting for it to finish loading. It's just so fuzzy and out of focus, and I almost felt like I saw that Vivid Video sticker and I was like, wow, this, for as much as I might dislike the experience of sitting through this movie, it is sort of transporting me back to a different time.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a tough movie to really kind of dig into because obviously there's no there. It's a tossed off effort that kind of lucked its way into a little bit of success because it's just got such an outrageous title. But it definitely feels like it's lacking a lot of the charm that early full moon movies have, and a lot of the ingenuity and a lot of the energy. Like it just, watching this high, I can tell you, does not really enhance the experience at all.
I'm sure it does not.
Because it's not funny, it's not giggly, it's just kind of a slow paced movie. It just made me feel very sleepy.
Yeah, and maybe I'll catch some flack for this from listeners, but like I'm not a particularly big fan of the movie Half Baked. And I just feel like stoner humor does nothing for me, and I think everyone would agree that is stoner humor done well. And I personally don't find a ton to love in that film.
Oh yeah, no, it's not a good movie. It is maybe the best like straight up stoner comedy, if you're not counting like The Big Lebowski, which is like elevated stoner comedy to a degree, or like Inherent Vice would kind of be the same subgenre of elevated stoner movie. But
well, yeah, I think stoner stuff works if it's a heavy spice, and I think if you have your Spicoli and your Wooderson from Fast Times and from Dazed and Confused, it's okay to spend a few minutes with a stoned Sean Penn or a stoned Matthew McConaughey when they're surrounded by other people who are sort of just existing on like a normal plane of existence.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But every character here seems to be trying to emulate that, except for inside the Bong world, where we're just getting these weird brief cameos. Brandy C from season 1 of Rock of Love is in there.
Oh my God.
As
I don't know who that is.
So
I have no clue what that is.
There was a VH1 show called Rock of Love where a bunch of women competed for the love and affection of Bret Michaels.
Oh God. Creepy.
And that was around the same time, probably. It had to be early 2000s when that show first aired. And
must have been.
One of the women who was a contestant on the show plays the stripper with the lip bra. The one who they make the crooked teeth blowjob jokes about. Oh,
yeah. Gross.
Yeah. So she's there. So it's star-studded, I think, is what the takeaway should be.
Oh, absolutely.
But you know what? I have to say, like you said, Tommy Chong, a little bit of fun. Tim Thomerson, a little bit of fun. Also a little bit of fun. Bill Moseley.
Sure. Why not? He just pops up, he just walks through. He doing a favor for Charles Band, I'm sure.
I mean, he kind of pops up and walks through. Oh, he almost like winks at the camera and does a like, what am I even doing in this movie kind of look on his face. Like, but you know what?
He's kind of at the cusp of like a minor little career resurgence because I think Devil's Rejects would have just come out. Yeah. So he's kind of like, he's in the consciousness again.
Yeah, so he was a welcome
remember
presence.
There was a very real like fan effort around the time The Devil's Rejects came out to get him nominated for an Oscar for that movie, which never really had any traction. But I remember there was a big there was like a petition people were passing around to get signed. I'm like, I don't know about that, but
Listen,
good for him.
anyone who's said the line "lick my plate, you dog dick" on a movie screen should be nominated for an Oscar.
Absolutely. So the thing we have to look forward to with Evil Bong, I looked ahead a little bit. I think most of these four bros stick around. The Larnell character becomes kind of the default lead, alongside, and this is very random, Sonny Carl Davis, who you see in this scene or this movie one time. He is the delivery man who drops off Evil Bong. He's wearing a name tag that says Rabbit. By the fourth movie, he's going to be the lead of the franchise.
I read that too, and I was like, that is just quintessential full moon nonsense.
That is so random that this like one scene minor character, who itself was a reference to Trancers 2, okay, because he plays this character in Trancers 2 at one point, and they bring him back for a cameo in this, and then he becomes the lead of the franchise.
I think we just
Very weird.
spoiled to our audience that neither of us has seen Trancers 2 yet.
Hey,
So-
no, I mean, look, I think we were upfront. We haven't seen a lot of these
Right.
movies. I haven't seen most of them.
Yeah, so when we do go back to the Trancers series, it may not be Trancers 2 the first time around, but yeah, we haven't seen it, so you'll know when you hear that'll have been a first-time watch. And I'm like really curious just your thoughts moving forward, because like the specter of there being 8 of these movies is pretty daunting.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it. I imagine some will be better and some will be worse.
Right.
Maybe this is the best it gets.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, and I'm trying to see if, like, by looking ahead at some of the names and casts, like, do I think that this is going to have peaks and valleys, or do I think like this one that we just watched is like the earnest grassroots folksy original, and it's just going to get more. I hate to say outwardly racist, but there's another thing this movie does that I really hate, and I was very upset about it every time it happened, which was for the strip club scenes and scenes when the guys are just goofing around. There's like a really timely, butt rocky, guitar driven rock music soundtrack that plays. But anytime weed is brought up, like someone lights up a bong, does something, it immediately switches to a reggae or hip hop song.
Oh, so annoying every single time. Yeah.
Literally every time. And I'm just like, really? Like, I mean, these guys would not be listening to the songs that they would be listening to Sublime. They would be listening to 311. They would, and that's what it would be like. There is a giant poster in the room, though, of the Rancid album and Out Come the Wolves, which is a record that I love, and I sort of don't really understand. It's almost like someone was just set dressing, like, get me some rock posters, and they went to someone's flea market and grabbed a box of stuff and brought it back, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
I think they 100% just looted a Spencer's Gifts for this decor, because they've got a lot of the posters, like, I don't even know what these were called, but it was kind of like a 1950s looking graphic of like a smiling guy. They'll say like weed or tequila or titties or something like that. They've got like 3 of those, and then they've got the poster that has the compilation of all of those posters. They've got like a one sheet with all of them on it. And it's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
I don't know what those were even called, but I remember seeing those everywhere.
I think with that happening, and then with the crossover universe inside the consciousness of the Bong world, I mean, we're getting like this movie has levels of Inception, it seems.
Oh yeah,
which is maybe it's a little bit deeper than we're giving it credit for.
Oh well, maybe we'll have to strap in and see.
You know what bothered me a little bit? No lava lamps or blacklight stuff in this movie.
Yeah, there should have been at least one lava lamp. Yeah,
I think they were too busy just finding posters and stuff to strewn about the room to show, empty pizza boxes and whatever to show how these guys live. And we haven't talked a whole lot about. We haven't talked a whole lot about Bachman, the like super stoner, and his catchphrase.
Oh, yeah.
And again, maybe my third genuine laugh of this movie, when they realize that Bachman is dead and Larnell is shaking him saying, "Give me a monkey, bro."
Yeah.
Gotta laugh at that one.
That is so like 2006 humor too, where everything was just like purple monkey dishwasher, or it was like inherently, if you said the words like monkey or ninja or bacon, like that was supposed to be a joke. That was the joke right there. So I think they're leaning on that. But yeah, he's very obnoxious.
You know
he's
what?
The dumbest of the characters.
He is. You know what these guys would have loved? These guys would have loved it. It would have been pumping in this stupid apartment all the time. It's just them constantly listening to the Bloodhound Gang's Bad Touch.
Oh my God. I listened to that album more than I care to admit.
So once?
Yeah, many times. I still have some songs memorized that are probably eating up valuable brain space. Yeah, pretty rough.
Also rough in this movie, audio and ADR.
Yeah, really bad.
There are
hard
moments.
to look at, hard to listen to.
It really is hard to love. It was crazy how there are some of the scenes, and particularly some Robin Sidney scenes that were like, she must have recorded the ADR dialogue in a completely different environment in a completely different, well, I was going to say completely different week, but that's not possible because this thing was churned out in a week, but on a completely different day. And same for Larnell at a few times, and it's just so bad. I mean, aside from the fact that it sounds like someone in a booth re-recording the ADR at a completely different volume, it also just didn't sync a lot of the time, and it was just like so glaringly noticeable. I mean, this is the kind of thing maybe you catch a line or two here and there in a movie, but there were 4, 5, 6 lines of dialogue in scenes where the audio was just not syncing up. And again, maybe I did watch a version that never stopped buffering, but it didn't sync up.
Yeah, I don't think it was you. Like, I had a lot of those same problems. Like, I think it's, it's just a very lazy, tossed off kind of movie. And lucky us, we get to watch 8 more of them. Can't wait. I'm looking forward to seeing some upgrades.
Oh, wait, you're talking about the crossover movie, too. I was going to say, I think it's only 7 more. Don't add another
there's a
one
crossover movie. There's a crossover movie.
Yeah.
But I think next week we'll be talking about something a little bit more from the heyday of Full Moon. I think one that's had a longer tail than a lot of the other series on here, and one that I hear is pretty good. I have not watched this movie.
Steve, tell us a little bit.
Watching next week?
I was going to let you take the reins on that one and introduce it. Tell us what we're watching next week, Steve.
Well, next week, the start of a new franchise, one of many in the Full Moon universe, but one of the most well-liked, and that's a movie called Subspecies. We are entering into some vampire horror, and we're going to Romania, which is going to be a big part of the Full Moon experience, is movies shot in their Romanian film studio.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to this episode next week. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. This is one I have seen this series, except for,
you've seen the whole thing,
except for the 5th one, which is just data specifically a little bit here, is being released next week on the big screen, which is
getting a theatrical release. Like, I mean, it's a very limited run, like a single screening kind of thing. But yeah, it is going to be showing in theaters in some places, including here in Austin.
Yeah,
which I will be out of town missing it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll be heading to my local Alamo Draft House in Brooklyn to check that out. And so once I'm done with that, I will have seen this series, and so I'm really interested to see what you're going to think of this one and subsequent sequels. And regardless of whether or not you love it, it's going to be a nice palate cleanser after Evil Bong.
I think so. I'm looking forward to getting more into the nitty-gritty of the early days of Full Moon. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Be sure to tune in next week to hear us talk about Subspecies. You have one more thing?
Yeah, I just want to say, guys, if you've been listening to these first couple episodes and you've been enjoying the show, please, jump on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this and rate and review the show. Drop us a nice rating and say some kind words. If you haven't enjoyed the first couple episodes, you're not legally mandated to continue listening, but we would prefer if you don't, jump on to these sites and share negative thoughts. We would love you to say something positive about the show. It'll really help us sort of reach a larger audience and more listeners. So if you've enjoyed the show, definitely rate and review. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss them when they drop weekly. Because as we get going with this thing, there's just so many movies in the Full Mooniverse and Full Moon adjacent that I'm sure we'll be branching off and offering other stuff too. So just definitely subscribe if you like what we're doing and you want to be in the loop each week. And if you want to follow us on any social media to get updates or information about the show, I am on Instagram at _cowboy_Jerry. So you can follow me there. I may post, some random horror stuff, some random full moon stuff, but maybe some updates about things that are upcoming on the show. What about you, Steve?
You can find me on Instagram at Minotaur Matador. You can find some upgrades or updates there. I also have another podcast. It's called Cinemarcade. We just launched as of today, as I'm recording this episode. So very exciting. That's a movie about. It's a podcast about movies, video games, and all the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. Each week on that show, we are watching a different movie and then playing the video game based on it. So lots and lots to cover there, and it's already been a lot of fun. So check me out there, and also give some good reviews to those. And, if you don't like the show, just write something really nice and we'll read it in a sarcastic voice. We'll understand that you're being sarcastic, and that way everybody wins. We'll just read it in that voice. Oh, this show is so good. They cover so many interesting movies.
Yeah. See, this is why you get paid the big bucks, because that is a very clever spin on that. So I support that as well. But yeah, make sure that you join us next time, where we will be moving out of the Bongaverse for a little bit to Romania while we cover 1991's Subspecies. See you then.